Alright, in today's video I'm going to walk you through the process on how to create this simple representation of a graham cracker so that as you are developing the s'more project you have a representative model of the graham cracker. Now when you open the actual assignment there is a nice photograph of a s'more that makes you definitely want to get to the end of this project and eat one. As you move down through you can see how to open up a standard millimeter part and come down through. You have a standard millimeter part because we're measuring all of these parts and pieces in millimeters. What you should have done so far is actually taken a graham cracker and used the standard millimeter scale and measured the height, the width, the length, the location of the holes, and the estimate of the hole size and fillet that goes through that part. What I'm going to do is actually then zoom in on the model or the layout of the model, and I'm going to utilize these dimensions to start my particular model. As I look at this graham cracker, and I can take a note here that this is 64 millimeters in length, 57 in width. The center is 28.5. It's 5.0 millimeters thick, and there's a hole pattern. It says hole pattern 8x8 offset. And I look at these dimensions. It says that it's 8x8, and then I could probably make the assumption that it is 8 from this hole to this hole, and then of course then from this hole to this hole would probably be 16. So I can go ahead and start building the graham cracker and then create hole patterns to create patterns on one side and then the other, and then also this slot feature that would run down through the center. So I'm going to go back to Inventor. I'm going to open up, this is the millimeter part file. I'm going to start a 2D sketch. Go ahead and drop that 2D sketch on my work plane, and then I'll grab my rectangle tool, and I'm just going to use this tool for efficiency. And I'm going to go 64, and I believe that was 57, would be the two dimensions I needed. And then I'll go ahead and finish the sketch and extrude. So that extrusion was 5 millimeters. I'll wait for my inventor here to catch up. There we go. We'll go 5 millimeters. All right, now I'm ready to start looking at a hole pattern for the graham cracker. So looking at the actual solid, this is a graham cracker we made before. The holes are a representation of the indentation and the hole, and then of course the fillet that's going to run around there. So I'll go back and take a look at the drawing and see that we have this hole pattern through here. It's an 8x8, and so we'll go ahead and we're going to start setting that up. Go back to my part, and I'm going to go ahead and just create one hole first, and I'll go ahead and set up the offset for my 8x8. And I'm just going to go straight into this and click a point, because I'm going to use a point to locate the hole. And then I'll dimension from this point to this outside edge, pull out, and I'll drop that as 8 millimeters. And then I'll do it again from this side to this point here, pull out and drop that here. I could have also used the linear tool using my hole tool, but this is just another way to show how you can use points and sketches to set up the location of a hole. So I'll finish up that sketch, grab my hole tool. Again, this is where I could have used that linear tool, linear placement, but this time I'm using from sketch, and that's fine. So I'll go ahead and let that point be located by the sketch and the hole tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and give the estimate of say 0.5. That's probably a little too small. We'll do an estimate of 1 for the size of that hole, and it's going to go through the entire graham cracker, so I'll keep it as through all, and then hit OK. Next thing is I'm going to go ahead and grab my fillet tool, and I'm going to fillet that top edge of the graham cracker because that graham cracker has a slight indentation to it. And I'm going to go ahead and just keep it as 2 millimeters and see how this looks in the end. Maybe too large, but we'll go ahead and show you how to edit that later. Now I'm ready to start that the pattern, my rectangular pattern, to set up the pattern of the graham crackers. So from my pattern bar, I'm going to grab the rectangular pattern tool, and I'm going to select two things. The first thing I'm going to select is going to be the fillet, and then the second I'm going to select is the actual hole itself, because that's the feature that I'm going to then be repeating. Then I'm going to grab the direction, and the first direction that I'm going to go in is going to be the top edge, and of course I'm not going to go left, so I have to then switch my direction to go in the right, and then set up the distance. That distance is going to be looks like 8 millimeters, and I need several of them. Actually, I'm going to go back and take a look at this drawing. Actually, it's not going to be 8, it's going to be 16, because this is the next piece I'm going to set. So it's going to be 16, and I need 4 total. So coming back in here to Inventor, I'm going to set this up to be 4, and then I'm going to change this to be 16. And I can see that these are going to space out in a nice, orderly way. also going to give it a second direction because I can put another set running down in this direction because this set of holes is the same. And I may also be able to try to get these down here. I may or may not be successful on the other side if this spacing is different. May have to do that differently, but we'll find out. So we'll go ahead and we're going to go ahead and set this up as 16 as well. And that would be 4 because the next hole is going to end up here, and that's going to run through here. If I were actually going to say, let's try this and do another set of rows, yeah, see the spacing doesn't line up, so that center pattern is going to give me a different spacing here. So instead of doing that, we'll go back and do this in 2 sets or several different rectangular patterns. So we'll set this up, we'll hit OK, and now those holes have been created. What I can do next is I'm going to set up my next hole and fill it to be located at this point. So this time I'll just grab my hole tool, and this time I will use linear, and I'm just going to click in a general direction or general location, and then I want to give it references. So I'm going to reference a dimension from this top edge, which would be 16. And then I'm going to reference from this side edge, again, 16. And now that positions the center of my hole. I can go ahead and hit apply. Now I have a hole. Again, I can now grab my fillet tool. We'll use the same 2mm fillet and apply. And then again, we'll use my rectangular pattern tool. Grabbing the fillet and then also that center hole. Very important to grab both. And then, of course, move down, select direction, and give it the direction. Some reason it always wants to go in that direction, and then I need to flip that direction and then set up the setup. So I need 3. That's going to give me 3, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set up the distance between, which then gives me 16. So I now have the distances set up, and I can go ahead and hit OK. What I'll end up doing is using that same hole pattern or a rectangular tool to then array this entire side to the other, or I may actually use the mirror tool to mirror this entire side to the other, which can easily be done after I go ahead and find center and continue to move forward. Alright, so now we're ready to go ahead and take the pattern that was created on the top of this graham cracker, and we're going to then mirror it down to the bottom side. So I'll grab my mirror tool, and one of the first things that I look at here is it wants me to select the features. And if I go ahead and start selecting the features, that's going to be great. But then the next thing it wants me to do is give me a mirror plane. Obviously, I don't have a mirror plane running through the center of the part, so I'm going to go ahead and create that mirror plane. To do that, I'm going to pull down my plane tool, and I'm going to find probably the easiest plane to do here is going to be mid-plane between 2 planes, because I want the center between this surface and the bottom surface. So I'll grab the top plane, then I'm going to actually then turn the part so that I can then see the bottom of this part, grab that, and as I grab that, it creates a plane right down through the center. It also helps me find center. And I can now go back and grab my mirror tool, and I can start selecting, because I'm going to want to be able to select this feature, and then I'm going to select this array, and I'm going to grab this feature, and then of course this array. Then I can tell it that they're the features I'm going to be working with. The mirror plane is going to be the next thing I'm going to give it, so I select that, and then select the mirror plane. It's now going to give me this little preview here to say, okay, if I make this, this is what I'm going to do. Is that what you want? I'm going to say, you bet, hit OK. And now it creates those holes for me. So now I can see that that pattern has been recreated on the other side, completely centered on the part. Alright, so the next feature we need to do is we need to set up that center perforation that's used to snap this graham cracker in half. So I'm going to run back here and just take a look at this. Don't have any real specific information on this drawing regarding the slot feature, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of add this in here to represent this. What I'll do is grab my 2D sketch, put a 2D sketch on the face, and what I want to do is then start working with this center. So I got to find center. So I'm going to draw a line from one side to the other. Then I can utilize the green dot for center, and I'm going to come across here to find where I'm going to start my first slot. So I'm going to just make this a quick rough estimate here, and I'm just going to come over, say 2mm, and that's going to be where I'm going to start my first slot. So I'll pull down my rectangle tool. I'm going to come down and grab my slot center to center. I'm going to then go ahead and select the end of that and then come out and say that that slot's probably going to be, say, 2mm. And then I'm going to pull out and I'm going to say that that slot's probably going to be about 0.5. That's a little bit big, so before actually creating this, we'll double click here and then make this a little smaller. And you see how it's very easy to adjust this little slot feature. So I got 1mm across 0.5. And it looks good. Hit finish sketch. Now I'll go ahead and I'll extrude that feature because I want to actually cut that out of my graham cracker because it is an indentation. So we'll go ahead and cut that out. Now we'll just use the fillet tool. We'll fillet that edge. Of course, that edge is nowhere near as large, so we'll make that a whole lot smaller. Look at that as being, say, a radius of 1. Again, we're modeling a rough representation of this graham cracker. And now we're ready to use, again, that rectangular tool where I'm going to select the fillet and then also the slot. And you got to kind of zoom in and move back and forth until you can actually see exactly what it is you're trying to select. So I have the fillet, and then I want to have that slot that's been extruded out of the graham cracker. And then I zoom out so I can see the graham, grab the direction button, and then I want to select the top edge. That's the white edge because that's the direction I want to move in, one of those edges. And it looks like it's going off the part. So we'll go ahead and we'll flip that direction. Now we just have to get our spacing and the number of them set up. I know they're not going to be spaced all that far apart. So let's see. Looking at 3, and now let's go 4. 4 is probably a little more accurate. And then let's go ahead and start setting this up. No, we can do more than 5, 12. We could probably even go 16. Now let's take that back to 15. All right. And again, this is a fairly rough representation of what this graham cracker is going to look like. And I can probably even say I can start adjusting this a little bit more to make this, say, 4.2 to give it a little bit more equal spacing on the edges here. So this is how you can see how manipulative your repetition pattern can be to set up what it is you want it to look like. When I go ahead and hit that, you can utilize that as your perforations in the center. And this is a real quick, easy way to run through how to utilize the rectangular pattern tool to array features, and more than one feature, not just a hole, but also fillets.